Sometimes criminals can be on the run for a long time, but I strongly believe in karma and that your actions do have consequences. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we're counting down our list of the top 10 evil convicts who managed to escape justice for years. So let's get into it. Number 10. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy kidnapped, took advantage of, and ended the lives of dozens of young women during the 1970s and possibly earlier. After more than a decade of denials, Ted confessed to ending the lives of more than 30 people committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978, but experts estimate the real number could exceed 100. Investigators believe the crimes he committed were unrelated, done by different people, but it was all Ted. He often used charm to disguise his true intentions when kidnapping victims, and extended this tactic to law enforcement, the media, and the criminal justice system to maintain his claims of innocence. He typically approached women in public places, either asking for help by faking an injury or impersonating an authority figure. Once tricked into being led away, they would be bludgeoned unconscious and taken elsewhere to be taken advantage of and eventually die. At least 12 of his victims were decapitated, and their severed heads were kept as mementos in his apartment. In 1975, Bundy was arrested and jailed in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault. He then became a suspect in a progressively longer list of unsolved homicides in several states. He was arrested for kidnapping and the deaths of many women. Now, he somehow ended up escaping prison twice, and then he was sentenced to death. He was put to death on January 24th, 1989. After his death, hundreds of revelers sang, danced, and set fireworks off in a pasture across from the prison as the execution was carried out, then cheered as the white hearse containing Bundy's corpse departed the prison. Safe to say, the public finally got their justice. Number 9. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader, aka BTK, an abbreviation he gave himself for bind, and kill, ended the lives of 10 people between the years of 1994 and 1991 in Wichita and Park City, Kansas. Now, he didn't just end lives but also stalked women, and 2 women he stalked in the 1980s and one whom he stalked in the mid-1990s filed restraining orders against him. He also sent taunting letters to police and media outlets describing the details of his crimes. Now, by 2004, the investigation of BTK was considered a cold case, but after a decade-long hiatus, Dennis initiated a series of 11 communications to the local media. This actively led directly to his arrest in February 2005, 30 years after he started his crimes. He pled guilty and was sentenced in 2005 to 10 life sentences, and though he's eligible for parole, it won't be until he's served at least 175 years. Number 8. Ariel Castro. Between 2002 and 2004, Ariel Castro kidnapped Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus from the streets of Cleveland, Ohio, and later held them captive in his home. Michelle told police that Castro had impregnated her at least 5 times and had induced miscarriages each time through beatings, hitting her with dumbbells, punching her, and slamming her against walls, and he also starved her. Now, all 3 girls were imprisoned at Castro's home until 2013, when Amanda successfully escaped with her 6-year-old daughter, whom she had given birth to while imprisoned, and contacted the police. Police rescued the 2 other girls and arrested Castro hours later. He was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of taking advantage of the girls. He pled guilty to 937 criminal counts of taking advantage of the girls, kidnapping, and taking their lives as part of a plea bargain. He was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 1,000 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 7. David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam, went on a spree of ending lives with his firearm many times in New York that started in July 1976. He ended the lives of 6 people and wounded 7 others by July 1977, terrorizing New Yorkers and gaining worldwide notoriety. David eluded the biggest police manhunt in the city's history while leaving letters that mocked the police and promised further crimes, which were highly publicized by the press. David was arrested on August 10, 1977, and subsequently indicted for 8 crimes that ended lives. He confessed to all of them and initially claimed to have been obeying the orders of a demon, prison manifested in the form of a dog belonging to his neighbor. After being found mentally competent to stand trial, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences in a state prison with possibility of parole after 25 years. He then admitted that the dog and devil story was a hoax, which is shocking. Intense media coverage of the case made David a celebrity, and he seemed to enjoy it. In response, the New York State legislature enacted new statutes known popularly as the Son of Sam laws, designated to keep criminals from financially profiting from the publicity created by their crimes. The statutes have remained law in New York State despite various legal challenges, and similar laws have been enacted in several other states. Number 6. Joseph James DeAngelo. Joseph James DeAngelo, aka the Golden State Killer, was a former police officer who ended the lives of 13 people, took advantage of 50 people, and had been involved in 120 burglaries in California between 1994 and 1986. He's responsible for at least 3 separate crime sprees throughout the state, each of which spawned a different nickname in the press before it became evident that they were committed by the same person. He was also linked to hundreds of incidents of theft, burglaries, vandalism, peeping, stalking, and prowling. He wasn't arrested until 2018 when DNA tracing from family members on genealogy sites linked him to his crimes. In June 2020, he pleaded guilty to 13 deaths and 13 counts of taking advantage of people. In August of that same year, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His crimes finally caught up to him, and he probably never would have been caught if it wasn't for his family member using that site. Number 5. Gary Ridgway. Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer, was initially convicted of 48 separate deaths. As part of his plea bargain, another conviction was added, bringing a total of convictions to 49. He ended the lives of women in the US state of Washington during the 1980s and 1990s. Most of Gary's victims were alleged to be sex workers and other women in vulnerable circumstances, including runaway. The press gave him this nickname after the first 5 victims were found in the Green River before his identity was unknown. He strangled his victims usually by hand, and after strangling them, he would dump their bodies in forested and overgrown areas in King County, often returning to the bodies to take advantage of them. On November 30th, 2001, Gary was arrested for the deaths of 4 women whose cases were linked to him through DNA profiling evidence. As part of a plea bargain where he agreed to disclose the locations of still missing women, he was spared the death penalty. He was sentenced to 48 life sentences with no possibility of parole, an additional life sentence, and 480 more years for tampering with evidence. Number 4. Robert Pickton. Robert Pickton worked full-time at his family's pig farm after inheriting it in the early 1980s in Vancouver, Canada. It was at this point it was believed that he started ending people's lives, and when he was done with their bodies, he would then feed them to his pigs to get rid of the evidence. He was finally arrested in 2002 and was convicted in 2007 for the deaths of 6 women, and was also the subject of a lengthy investigation that yielded evidence of numerous other deaths. Robert was charged with the deaths of an additional 20 women, many of them from Vancouver's downtown east side, but these charges were stayed by the Crown in 2010. Robert was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the longest possible sentence for second-degree under Canadian law at the time he was sentenced. The conviction was appealed twice by his lawyers, but ultimately unanimously rejected by Canada's Supreme Court. During the trial's first day of jury evidence, the Crown stated that Robert had confessed to 49 deaths to an undercover agent from the Office of Inspector General who was posing as a cellmate. The Crown reported that he told the officer he wanted to end the life of another woman to make it an even 50, and that he was caught because he was sloppy. Number 3. Jeffrey Dahmer. It has been reported that Jeffrey Dahmer ended the lives of 17 males between 1978 and 1991. On July 22, 1991, he asked Tracy Edwards to accompany him to his apartment to pose for nude photographs and drink beer for $100. While there, things escalated and Jeffrey tried to end Tracy's life. Tracy escaped and flagged down 2 Milwaukee police officers explaining what happened. They then went to the apartment and an officer saw an open drawer which, upon closer inspection, contained scores of Polaroid pictures, many of which were human bodies in various stages of dismemberment, so they arrested Jeffrey. Then a more detailed search of the apartment revealed a total of 4 severed heads in the kitchen. A total of 7 skulls, some painted, some bleached, were found in Jeffrey's bedroom inside a closet. Investigators discovered blood drippings upon a tray at the bottom of Jeffrey's refrigerator, plus 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle. And in his freezer, investigators discovered an entire torso, plus a bag of human organs and flesh stuck to ice at the bottom. Elsewhere in the apartment, investigators discovered 2 entire skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved male sex organs, a mummified scalp, and in a 57-gallon drum, 3 further dismembered torsos dissolving in an acid solution. A total of 74 Polaroid pictures detailing the of his victims were found, and that is just disgusting. Although he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and psychotic disorder, he was found to be legally sane at his trial. He was convicted of 16 counts of ending someone's life and was to serve 16 terms of life imprisonment on February 17, 1992. Then on November 28, 1994, he was beaten to death by Christopher Scarver, a fellow inmate. Number 2. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, dubbed the Night Stalker, had a highly publicized home invasion and life-ending spree that terrorized the residents of the greater Los Angeles area and later the San Francisco Bay Area over the course of 14 months. Richard cultivated strong interest in Satanism and the occult and would often commit burglaries to support his addiction, many of which were later frequently accompanied by the ending of people's lives and taking advantage of them. He also frequently enjoyed degrading and humiliating his victims, especially those who survived his attacks or whom he explicitly decided to live, by forcing them to profess that they loved Satan or telling them to swear on Satan. He was eventually caught, and in 1989 he was convicted of 13 counts of taking someone's life, 5 attempts to take someone's life, 11 counts of taking advantage of a person, and 14 burglaries. He was then sentenced to death and was on death row. And coming in at number 1 is the Zodiac. The Zodiac took the lives of 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. The Zodiac coined this name in a series of taunting letters and cards that he mailed to regional newspapers. Some of the letters included cryptograms or ciphers in which he claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. He targeted young couples and a lone male cab driver. 2 of his wounded victims survived, and it was said that he wore a black executioner's hood with a chest piece with Zodiac's crosshair symbol stitched in white on it. The Zodiac claimed to have taken the lives of 37 victims and has been linked to several other cold cases, some in Southern California or outside the state. Now, while many theories regarding the identity of him have been suggested, the only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher who died in 1992. Now, it seems like the victims may never get their justice, as he is still unidentified today. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 evil convicts who managed to escape justice for years. Who in our list do you think is the worst? Let us know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe while you're down there. I'm your host Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.